Hello, friends. Welcome to another edition of the Lovecast. You're listening to episode 160, and we're going to call this one Acting as Alignment, an interview with hit TV actress Lisann Valentin. Guys, how are you? So good to be back with you on the Lovecast. I have just a fantastic episode for you today. Really had an opportunity to interview an amazing human being, and we will get into my interview with hit TV actress Lisann Valentin shortly. Before we get into that, I wanted just to mention a couple of things, just a couple of quick announcements. First of all, thank you to all the listeners that have let me know that you've been enjoying the podcast. We always love to hear from listeners. Real quick, if you could do this, if you would, before we get into this episode, if you would just go to iTunes and if you would rate and review this podcast, it makes just a monumental difference in helping the podcast get exposure and visibility. So if you would go and just rate it and review it, you can be honest and share your thoughts there. I would just really appreciate that. We the majority of folks who do listen to this podcast have not, just because of the stats that I get to see. I know that the majority of folks have not rated or reviewed this podcast. So if you would go and do that, I would greatly appreciate that. And another quick thing I wanted to tell you about, I have a mailing list I would really love for you to be a part of. That's in case, I do communicate on that mailing list semi-regularly. Just things that I want to make you aware of. So if you would, I would love for you to be on that mailing list. What you'll need to do is if you just go to my personal website, which is jamaljavanji.com. That'll take you to my homepage. You just scroll to the bottom. You'll see a little place in there where you can put your email address in there and just click submit. And that will get you on my mailing list. I would love to have you there. It just helps us communicate a little bit better. There's things I share there that I don't share other places. So please consider being on the mailing list and also subscribing and rating and reviewing this podcast as well. Okay. So with that said, I want to jump right into this conversation I had the privilege of having with a hit TV actress, Lisann Valentin. She, just a little bit about her. She lives in New York City, and she she was an author, one of the authors of a New York Times best-selling book called Eat, Pray, and Love Made Me Do It. She also was an attorney, and she is now a hit TV actress, and she's done over 42 credits to her name. Just a few of them that many of you have heard of. She's been in some hit TV series. One is on NBC called Manifest, which is she has a recurring role there on NBC series Manifest. She's been in Blacklist, another series, New Amsterdam, also on NBC, and also Blue Bloods on CBS. So she's a profound and just an amazing actress, and is doing great work in Hollywood. But in addition to that, she is a healer and somebody who helps people transform and become their best selves. She works in a healing coaching capacity with folks, in addition to being a hit TV actress and an author. So just a fascinating life. She's doing great work in the world. And I wanted to have a conversation with her and bring that conversation to you here on the podcast. So if you would just take a few minutes to prepare your ears to hear what you're designed to hear in this episode. I know that there is just nuggets of gold in this conversation that I really feel you could benefit from, no matter what your situation is or where you are in life. What Lisann has to say is vital for all of us. Okay, so without further ado, here is my conversation with Lisann. Hello, friends. Welcome to another edition of the Lovecast. You're in for a treat today. I have a very special guest on the show today, Lisann Valentin. And Lisann is coming to us. She currently lives in New York City. Did you grow up in New York City?
I did. Mm-hmm.
You did? Okay. Okay. So I read in your bio a little bit that you have some ties to Puerto Rico. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm Puerto Rican, and we went back and forth to Puerto Rico all the time.
Okay. So you kind of split time between Puerto Rico and New York City.
Yeah, still do.
Awesome. Fantastic. So I'm super excited to get into Lisann's story. Just fascinating individual, fascinating work. And I think you guys are going to be really, just really encouraged to hear her journey and some insights that she has gained along the way. But Lisann is just in case you don't know about her, she was an attorney at one point. She also is a New York Times bestselling author. And you wrote a book called Eat, Pray, and Love Made Me Do It. Is that correct?
I am one of the authors of that book. Yes.
One of the authors of that book. Yes. Totally. And Lisann is also an accomplished actress. And you've been in over 30 credits, I believe.
About 41 now.
41. Wow. Amazing. And you're a co-star in shows like Manifest. Is that
on Netflix? Yeah, Recur.
Netflix. I've heard. I've actually not watched that show, but I've heard great things about it. So Manifest, Blue Bloods. I think that airs on CBS. Is that correct? I appreciate you being on the podcast. Thank you for coming on.
I'm excited to be here and to have a chat with you.
Awesome, fantastic. So one of the things I'm really intrigued about is I just love to hear a little bit about. Okay, because your first quote unquote career, if we will say, was an attorney. So can you talk a little bit more about how you got into law, practicing law? What kind of attorney were you, and is that something you always wanted to do growing up? Because throughout all your career, so to speak, whether it be law, whether it be acting, or even being an author, there is a spiritual thread, kind of a thread that runs through all of this. And I'd love to hear a little bit more about that, but what led you into practicing law?
I wanted to help people. And the way I saw the law as helping people was through a form of storytelling that I'd witnessed on television. And the first woman that spoke Spanish, who was bilingual, who I thought looked like me, was on The Cosby Show. She played Mrs. Huxtable. Mm-hmm. And so I remember seeing her and I was like, I want to do what she does. I mean, she lived in Brooklyn like me. And I asked my mom, I was like, Mom, what does she do? Who is she? And my mother goes, oh, she's a lawyer, because Mrs. Huxtable played a lawyer. Mm-hmm. She was a lawyer. And I was like, yeah, that's exactly what I want to do. And so the thread of storytelling through the law, which is exactly what I ended up doing, I was in civil defense litigation. So what that meant was that I'd helped basically the 1% companies defend cases against them where people had been injured in different ways. And so there was certainly an element of storytelling there. It just wasn't the fulfilling kind that I'd imagined would help me change the world.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
totally. And at what point, how long did you do that? At what point did you start to have a sense of, I would say, when did you start getting restless or feeling like, this may not be what I'm here to do?
The first year of law school is where I felt like this may not be what I'm here to do.
Okay.
But at that time, I was very linear in how I approached life. I shunned the intuitive part of me, even the spiritual part to some degree, and was being very rational and practical. So when I had all these other hints of like, you can do this, you can do that, I was like, that's not a logical career path. I am supposed to have a job, stick to it for the rest of my life. I'm supposed to get married, buy a couple of houses, have maybe like 2.5 children, retire somewhere sunny, and then die. And that is what a life well lived is supposed to look like. This is sort of where my brain was at. And so even though I felt the nudges in me telling me this is not the thing, but if you want to do it, you have all the support you need. And so I just kept like swimming against the current, because I felt like I had to, I'd committed to that. So from first year law school, I knew. And then first year practicing law, it was the challenge was like, I could feel like my soul screaming, like, this is not it. And so I tried other avenues of like explored it on my own, thinking maybe I wanted to do entertainment law. No, I couldn't. It just still didn't feel right. There was something missing. And so going into court every day where I was in very contentious environments, I'm an empath. So I wasn't able to compartmentalize what happened in court and leave it there. I took it all home with me. And so that was super challenging because I didn't know how to use my empathic gifts at that time. Again, very linear, shunning my intuition, my spiritual background at that time. And so I got the nudge to take an acting class, hoping that it would cloak me in some type of armor when I walked in the courtroom, because this is what I was looking for. And then all the while I was blogging, talking about, this is not my path. How do I find my new career path? Let's read some books. One of them was like a book by Thich Nhat Hanh, a book called Eat, Pray, Love by Elizabeth Gilbert. I kept reading all these self-help books that I literally did not. I was like, who wants to read self-help books? Well, like this one right here raises her hand, starts reading them. That's when I took that acting class and something lit up in me. And I just felt it. I just knew. I was like, this is it. Mm-hmm. This is it. But it took me a long time to get from this is it to like jumping with both feet in. Because I still had that rational part of me that was like, I need a plan. I need to figure this out. What does this mean? That's the long of it, Jamal.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. Well, let's back up a little bit, because there's been this spiritual thread. There's been this element with you your whole life. Can you talk a little bit more about your background? Because I know in your family, right? So you describe yourself as an empath, which for the listeners, I think we've talked about this on the podcast before, but I've heard it put, there's about 1% to 2% of the population that would have, or would be described as empathic, but basically people who are empaths or empathic in nature have an ability to discern or to actually embody the energy of others, to really feel it. It's almost like it's sometimes can be very difficult to tell what is my energy and what is somebody else's energy. So my understanding of that is that you're kind of born with that. You come into the world kind of as the soul that it has the ability to really in tune and to feel the energy of others. And so I would imagine it's been something you've experienced your whole life, even as a child. And that probably relates a lot to even your family lineage and background. Can you talk a little more about that?
Sure. Yeah. I was always empathic. I didn't have the language to understand why I felt everything all the time, or why I could feel into the energy of a room and how I presented myself when I understood it to be either safe or not safe. And there's so many levels and elements to that, but I do agree. Being an empath is an intuitive gift. I think everyone has the ability to tune into that frequency, but to survive, I think a lot of people just lower the volume, if that makes sense. And so I didn't lower the volume. I didn't lower the volume. I was like, all the things. And so I grew up in a family that they were all intuitive energy healers. And I say healers with an asterisk, because my perception is always that anyone who identifies as a healer knows that they're not doing the healing. They're just facilitating someone to activate healing within themselves. Right. So I think
it's a great way to put that. I love how you put that. So you're helping unlock a person to tap into their healing potential.
Yeah, absolutely. Totally. Like I'm just a really cool straw. Like that's the facilitator of this journey. And so my mom would always do something. We didn't even call it anything. I learned through Christianity, it was called like laying on of the hands. Later on, Reiki. It depends on whatever language you want. And so she would do that to me. I would see my grandmother do that for my grandfather. My grandfather was highly intuitive. He was clairvoyant, clairaudient. He had all the clairs going on. But again, we didn't have that language. And so when we were there, like psychic development was just Saturday, right? And so we go for a meal, and then like he would talk to us. He would tell us the potential timeline that was coming up based on what was going on in our lives. So when I say timeline, what I mean is I don't believe anyone can really tell you the future. I think you embody an energy that might lend a glimpse into what the next step will look like. You shift your energy, that next step changes. right? And so
Totally.
my grandfather was just, you walked in the house and he's like, hey, da 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 da. And he'd just go like, he'd just start like sharing, warning, guiding, and giving us love in that way. And so he learned from his grandmother. So my 2 times great grandmother was a renowned healer in Puerto Rico. And she worked with plants, and people came to her from all over the island. And she would take like plants, medicinal plants, and give people the ointments and things that they needed, tinctures or whatever. And energy healing was her thing. Mm-hmm. And so this is just sort of really natural in my family, but we didn't really give it a title. And for many years, I didn't. What I did know is that within the context of religion, I really embraced that structure because I was in a very linear structural place. And so I kind of shunned this. What is this Saturday thing that we do? I don't know what this is. I don't understand it. I'm not learning about this in school. Therefore, I don't think I should be tapping into this. So it took me a really long time to embrace it, but it was never fully gone because in my opinion, this energy healing stuff is just an emanation of unconditional love. And that doesn't go anywhere. You can turn up the volume, turn down the volume, but it doesn't go anywhere. Yeah.
Totally. That's fantastic. And just to go back to a point you were making about a healer understands that they are not the ones doing the healing, but they're just unlocking the person. It makes sense because, I just, even from the New Testament, when you would read about Jesus doing specific healings, and when they would, after they were healed, they would try to thank him. And he would say, it was you. It was what was inside of you, your faith, this dimension of perception within you that made you well.
Yeah.
And so he didn't even take credit for it. So sometimes I like to say, Jesus didn't heal anybody. People will look at me like I'm crazy. It's like, no, and he even said it. It was your faith.
Yeah.
That dimension within you that made you well. So good. So well said.
Yeah.
So this thread, this was just a part of like your family. They were just people who were in tune with this dimension, the spiritual dimension of life. They would serve people. They would have like your grandfather would have the ability to see patterns, tendencies, and kind of be able to perceive that and speak into that. So this has always been with you. So then you get to law school. You're following the path laid out for you by society, right? You go to school, go to college, do the career thing, but you're in it. And obviously there's something within you that's not settled, or just, there's more, there's a sense that there's something more. I totally relate with that. A few years back, I wrote a book called Living for a Living. And it's really it's really kind of a story about my journey from moving from my, profession that is geared towards survival. People ask you, what do you do for a living? It really means, what do you do for money? What do you do to survive?
Right.
But to live is something quite different. So what I'm perceiving is that here you are as an attorney, surviving for sure, working, doing your job, but you're not actually living. There's something deeper inside that's saying there's more work here. So you took an acting class. So when you first took that acting class, could you have ever imagined where that would have led you? I mean, just strictly from your acting career. I mean, being in, like you said, 40 plus credits now, being on hit TV shows, you had no idea. But, at what point did you, when you stepped into it, did you know this is it? This is part of it?
I could cry thinking about this just because it's such a beautiful question. No, I don't think I could have imagined this very human self would not have imagined that I'd be where I am today. But there was a part of my soul that knew. This is like inner knowing of like, this is it. This is it. And that shifts, right? As we grow, our dreams grow. And we start to see what more is possible, the more we open ourselves up to what more is possible. And so at that time, I wasn't living, but acting classes gave me life. So I had something more to look forward to other than like, okay, I'm planning a vacation on this day. I'm going to live for the day I can go on vacation. And so like I'm, 80 hours a week working until I can do that. that it looks like, it feels like a hamster wheel as I think about it. And I would do the classes on Saturday, and I was like, this feels so good. And I was learning, and it's an interesting thing, acting, because what you're learning is how to embody human behavior, but in a structured way, which is, you think you know how to do that as a human being. But when there's a camera in front of you and you're repeating, let's say, a line or a story, it's very different. And so I got to play the way I used to play as a little girl. I would just disappear into a world that I created and then make it whatever I wanted. And interestingly enough, that's what we do every day, right? We co-create this existence by how we establish our day, how we establish our morning. How much imagination do we want to set free into the making of our day? And so acting was just more than just, I'm learning a skill set so I can have a career in front of the camera. It was more like I'm remembering the skill I already had on how to play on this stage of life. I'm remembering how to play. And that's what it did for me. That's what it did for me.
Amazing. You know, and when people think of acting, or at least when I used to think of acting, I used to think of playing a role that is not you. But there's a quote by you. I wrote it down because I think it's profound, and I wanted to share it here. And this is a quote that you made about acting. And he says, "I am always me. Even as an actor, I merely magnify a part of myself that resonates with the character. I carry that note within the complexity of the orchestra that is me. And in that vibration, I appear transformed." So I just was like, there is so much in that. So, and because I tell people all the time, whether you call it an ego, your construct, your story, whatever, we all have a story. We all have a construct. We're all acting. We're all playing a role. So sometimes, like, what does it mean to be Jamal? What does it mean to be Lisann? What does it mean to, who does it, it's like, it's a role we're playing, but the role, if that role that we're playing is in alignment with who we actually are, then we are always us. And then, what you said there is that, when that note resonates with who you really are, that's when transformation occurs. And so I guess a question I have for you, just to kind of get into a little bit about, some of the roles you played, but I thought of this question. What is a role or a few roles that you have played in a film or TV show that really embodies that dimension of who you are? Just a few that come to mind.
It's interesting. There's this role. The first thing that came to mind was I played a mom on this show called The Blacklist, and she lost her daughter. And so the ferociousness of her love, that was definitely in tune with who I am, because I feel like love isn't always gentle and sweet. Love is ferocious, like the lion's roar. Like when I feel the depth of the love of the divine, it is like earthquakingly beautiful and wild and strong. And when I got that character, I was like, yeah, that's definitely part of me. And meanwhile, I haven't, thankfully, been in her shoes where I lost a daughter, and it was such a complex storyline with a bigger message. But that role specifically, because she's so different than me, she's an immigrant mom. She has a Spanish accent, not me at all, but in the level of her love was totally me. And it was one of my favorite roles to play, actually, for many years. And do you want another example? Do you want to jump on that?
Please.
Interestingly enough, the role I play on Manifest is such an opposite to who I am. I'm not a police officer. I am a New Yorker. But I take my work very seriously. I love attention to detail is like my thing. I'm just like, I'm on it when I'm on it, right? And she is not on it. She is the opposite of on it. But what I love about her is that she seems so tough, but she's a softie. And that's also me, right? I can come across because of that natural New Yorker in me. I come across as like this tough thing if you meet me in the street. Well, if you used to meet me in the street anyway. And I'm just like, literally give me a puppy and like you see the truth of like how I melt. And so that resonated a lot with me. And it was also really fun to be in costume. You know, wearing a police officer's uniform it's heavy. It's heavy on the body. So to be able to come across with that lightness in opposition to how I physically felt also was like, there's a piece of me too. Like, how do I shift into a space of light when everything feels dense? I don't know. I'm the kind of person that can see the poetry in everything. And so that was one of the roles, playing Officer Molinaro on Manifest.
It's amazing. Incredible. Do you have a TV show or film that you've been a part of that you're the most proud of?
The most proud of? I think I'm proud of all of them. I couldn't say that. I could say that I'm more proud of like how I responded on a show to my environment. So I'll say I did a show. Actually, this is the most proud moment, not necessarily like it's better than any other show. I was on a show called Search Party on HBO. And I remember this was during the time where I fully embraced it. And it took me a while, but it really felt like embodying my spiritual gifts, the call of my life, and what that looked like. And I was just talking to the divine within me while I'm on set, while the lights are on me, while they're adjusting. And I'm there and I'm just looking around. And what I'm hearing come through is like, you don't need to do anything more if you don't want to. You don't need to launch a service or a job or website. You being who you are
is enough.
That's enough.
Wow. So good.
Yeah.
So good. I love just a little bit of the insight into like, so on set acting, there's a conversation happening within you with source, with the divine, and that's informing you in everything you do. Can you say more about that? Because I don't think that's, would you say, again, I'm not an actor, I'm not in the Hollywood business, so I don't know, but is that would you say, is that common within your field?
I don't think it's commonly spoken about, but I don't know if it's common. I know that, you know, before when I'm in the honey wagon or if I'm in the dressing room before I go on, there's a couple things I do. I hear other actors talk about how they meditate, right? But the first thing I do is I get on my knees and I say, thank you. I just say, I'm so thankful for this. Thank you. Thank you, God. Thank you for this. I'm so excited I get to play today. And then if I have time, if I feel like I can meditate, I will. Otherwise, I do that before I get there. And then even while I'm on set, there's a level of meditation of being so grounded in the moment that nothing else exists. And in that space, you are connected to like the ultimate source within you, right? Because you're just so there. You're just so in it. And I imagine on some levels, actors talk about this. They maybe use different language around it. But for me, it's always there. And then when I'm done, I get on my knees and I say, thank you again. Thank you for this day. Amazing.
I love how your perception of work is play, right? You get to play today, which is a great way to live, which to me sounds like living for a living, which is fantastic. When it comes to, and again, I love how you talk about meditation. It feels like there's a meditation happening even as you're on set, even as you're reciting lines. I've heard it put this way, and this is kind of what I talk about with folks I work with. But meditation, obviously, it's an act. There's a process you can learn. But the goal of meditation is not meditation, as much as the goal of meditation is to pay attention, to be fully involved, fully invested in what you're doing. So when you're meditative, the goal of meditation is to become meditative in life, which is really just heightened attention to whatever it is that you're doing. So whenever you bring that heightened attention, there is a conversation happening. That's been my experience. Like when you're bringing a heightened, and you could be eating, you could be cooking, you could be having a conversation. And as you're saying, you could be reciting lines on a set. But if you're fully invested and involved and paying attention, there is a conversation between the divine and yourself happening.
Yes, gosh, this is the number one lesson that has made me feel more empowered as an empath. This, what
Mhm.
you're talking about, is the key to all of it. And, I learned how to formally meditate when I was 14. A nun taught me how to meditate.
Interesting.
And then I started to see the similarities between meditation and prayer. Repeating a word in prayer is like repeating a mantra. This is all connected. The energy of the Holy Spirit is like that. It's the same feeling of just like that vibration of unconditional love that for me, it pulses in my body, right? When I get to that space, it's just pure, it feels magical. It's mystical. It's otherworldly. And I'm getting tingles up my legs as I say it. And so but it doesn't have to be this thing where you're, okay, I'm going to get really quiet. I'm going to shut off all the lights. Everyone be quiet. And then you sit there and let me get to the place of Zen.
Right.
Forcing is not going to get you to Zen.
Well, it's not about getting somewhere, right?
No,
it's about being somewhere.
And so you can be
Yes.
that space when you're washing dishes, when you're going to the grocery store, when you're jogging. Like a lot of people get there with exercise because they're focusing on the breath and they're not trying to get anywhere other than being fully in here. And I think if that unlocks anything for anyone, I pray that it unlocks that inner peace within you. So it can help you see the world through those eyes of unconditional love and be able to co-create your existence, your reality in a way that honors you. Take the paintbrush and make this palette whatever you want it to be.
Totally. I love that. And when a lot of times people talk about being stuck or feeling stuck, maybe it's in a profession, career, or whatever. But if you will pay attention, that's the thing I always say. If you pay attention, if you learn how to show up in that meditative space and pay attention to your essence, your being, what you're feeling, the perceptions that are the energy that you're experiencing, it will lead you out. It'll lead you out of what you feel trapped in. But the more you seek to get out,
you're just seeking the feeling of the seeking, like the search.
Totally. You're trying to get somewhere. People are trying to get somewhere, trying to fix something. Yeah. The more stuck you tend to be. But if you just show up, fully embrace the moment you're in, it will lead you. And that's kind of like you become aware of that intuition, that what we call intuition, which is your higher self, your deeper self saying, hey, there's more. There's more. So for you, that happened obviously as you were practicing law, hearing that there's more. Obviously, I think if you had a time machine, we all, if you could skip to the future and someone could say, hey, Lisann, it's great. Don't worry. You can take this leap and move into the acting career because you're going to be in 40 some, credits and you're going to, it's going to work out great for you. I mean, that would have been nice, but you didn't have that. So
no, I don't think everyone can handle that. Also, I think it depends on the mindset that you're in. I don't think even 18-year-old me could have handled that. And it would have probably affected all of my decisions and maybe even steered me away from it. Because the things that we face shape us, right? When we go through something instead of sidestepping and avoiding it, it actually better informs us for what may lie ahead. And that's why I'm always so, when I think about this idea, if I could go into the future and and the funny side, it's like, yeah, let me know what the lotto numbers are. Let me know what to invest in, like on that level. Right. But on another, I always ask, only let me see what I can handle. You know better than I in this human body. When I speak to my highest self, when I speak to the divine within me, I just say, only let me see what I can handle right now. That way I don't sabotage the thing that I want. Because if it's too big, it could be scary. I always say, like, imagine, it's not even my quote, it's Neville Goddard, right? Imagine better than the best you know. Be open and available to what more is possible. Some of my teachers, they share that with me. And just to sit in that, be open and available to what more is possible. Imagine bigger, imagine more, and let yourself sit in that energy of the more. And let it unfold as it will. You planting the seed, don't worry about what the tree is going to look like. It's going to grow.
So good. So good. I love that. Because whatever that tree, whatever is going to, let's say it's a tree, right? Whatever it's going to be is already in the seed. It's already there. It doesn't need anything more. So you just put it in its proper environment. Whatever it needs will get drawn to it, and it becomes what it's designed to be.
Yeah.
So I love that. And so your intuition, so would it be fair to say that if we are seeds, all of us are seeds, then the proper soil is the intuition, moving into that inner space where you're beginning to listen and settle there, stay in that inner place, because that's the soil in which the seed of who you are designed to be will begin to flourish.
Yes, I would say absolutely. That is the soil.
So good. So good. Okay. So I want to ask you this question, because I know it's not been a seamless process, and it's not for any of us. So the question would be, what has been one of the biggest challenges you have faced in following your intuition or listening to your intuition, moving from more of the typical career as an attorney to moving into the arts, acting, writing? What's been a major challenge to you in that transition?
Some might say it's the opinions of others, but really what it is, the reflection of what those opinions mean to me. Right.
Can you say more?
Yeah, sure. It doesn't. So people are always going to have their opinions, and that's shaped by their experience. But if it matters to me, if what they say matters at a level so deep that I push my own feelings aside, that is the challenge. Or that I want their approval, affirmation. It matters more to me to feel accepted in their eyes than to accept myself, then that is where the challenge shows up. And so lots of moments like that came up where I had to say, why does this matter? What is this bringing up in me? And then looking at that space and working on allowing myself to heal that wound wherever it came from. And so like people have asked me, like, what's the worst piece of advice you've gotten? Which is, it falls into this category, whereas you can only do one thing. Pick one thing. You can't be an actor or an author and, you can't do all of that. And I'm like, well, who says? And so, yeah. So like, and I see that all the time. Do it all. Change your mind. There's this idea that we can't change our minds, that we can't grow, that we have to pick the one thing and only be that. And no, I disagree wholeheartedly. I think if you want to be one thing and you feel good in that, then be the one thing. That's fine. But if not, then do it all. Do it all.
Totally. And most people are not just one thing, you just on a very practical level. Some people are your son, a daughter, a wife, a husband, a business an entrepreneur, a healer. I mean, there's so many roles that we play in this movie of life that we're in. And if you're, and we all to some degree, and I tell this all the time, you're an actor. That doesn't mean inauthentic. It just means actually the opposite. The more you bring the characters and the roles that you're playing here in this life into alignment with your truest and highest self, then that's what you're here to do. That's the work we're here to do. And then we work out the patterns and the traumas and all the things that we are here to work out. But that's how we do it. So I love that. The worst piece of advice, that's actually a question I was going to ask you. What is the worst piece of advice that you've ever gotten? And so many of us have been told that you can only be one thing, when in reality, you're everything. Like if we want to get really to the core of who we are, I always say we come from the source. Some people say God, however you want to, whatever language you want to put on that. Well, what is that? Everything. So that's our source, and we're the image and likeness of that. So the more we move into that space, the more we realize that, we are much more than one or two roles that we have been told that we're limited to.
Yeah. So. And I would even venture to say, let's eliminate the context of a career in this, right? Because you said it, right? We're mothers, daughters, brothers, fathers, so let's say you have, like my parents, they both worked, just middle class. They had their government jobs, or they got a pension and retired, and they left the arts that they loved as a hobby. And they've lived good lives, I would say, honorable lives. And taught me so much by just observing who they were in the world with flaws and all, and knowing the impact they made. And to say that if you do have the one job and you do have the hobby and you have the kids and the house and the responsibilities and all the things, but you show up lit up every day, you let yourself light up, you don't dim your light for anyone, and you make sure you're just shining, you change the world because you are changing yourself. You're allowing yourself to be that love. And that's enough. That's more than enough. That's everything.
It's enough. Totally. Well, I mean, look at just in nature. I get, my wife and I, we live in Southern California here, and it's in a mountain community. So we're up about 5,500 feet. It's a national forest. And so springtime, I get to walk, we take walks, and, flowers are blooming and trees are budding. And I heard somebody put it this way at one point, like a flower will bloom, not because of what you think of it, even though it's nice if you enjoy that flower, you see the beauty of that flower, but the flower is going to bloom because that's what it is. It's what it's designed to do. So it really challenged me. And I guess the challenge was what you do in this world and the work that you do here in this world. If it's coming from the fact that it's just who you are, then you're here to bloom. Mm-hmm. Some people will stop and observe and appreciate that bloom. And some people won't. It's nothing to do with you. It's more really about what's going on with them. But for you, the motivation is just to bloom. And if your motivation is just to bloom, you can't lose. That's success.
Yes. Yes.
So good. And I love that. I love that you're living that and embodying that. So, and I love that we can't nail you down and say, well, Lisann, she's an actor, she's an author, she's an attorney, all of it. But you're also a light worker, you're a healer, you're a shaman. Can you say more? What does that dimension of you look like?
It's so much fun. It's just like living in, I like to say magic, and I know that word doesn't resonate with everybody, but I see everything as magical. Like I saw a cardinal in the tree yesterday, a red cardinal, and I was like, oh, that's magic. Like, I just love seeing that. And so I really get to play with all the gifts that God has given me. And so shaman is just the word that really, it's the best word to describe the collection of gifts that I have and how I am able to show up in the world and support other people. And so it just is the best description for all the intuitive gifts that I have.
Okay. How would you define shaman? Like, what's that?
The one who knows.
The one who knows.
The one who
like
knows.
That. The one who knows.
Yeah. And there's so many shamans, but you call yourself whatever you want. And I mean, I think for me, as a Puerto Rican woman, in our heritage, there is indigenous Taino. They're closely related to the Arawak. And so they had their shamans. They were called boitius. The thing is that like anyone who's Puerto Rican has a mix of indigenous and African and Spanish European, whoever showed up on that island. So there wasn't this one place to learn. It was just storytelling that pulled the stories through, kind of like in my own family, the traditions, the healing modalities and traditions that they honored. And it wasn't labeled anything, and it wasn't divided like, oh, you are only Taino, so you only do this. No. And so when I heard the word shaman, I remember going, yeah, I don't know what that is, but something about that. And then when I got the call to be a shaman, literally it came in as a call. I was waiting for a call my whole life, Jamal. I was like, am I a nun? Am I a pastor? What do I need to do? When is this call coming? And then the call came and it was shaman. I was like, I don't even know what that means. And I said yes to it. I was in like a theta state. I wasn't asleep, but I wasn't fully awake. And I heard it and I said yes with my full soul. And then I bolted out of bed and I go, what did I say yes to? What does that mean? And I had to go explore. And then when I learned that Taino call it boitiu, like I just started bawling and I was like, I get it. This is what my family lineage is about.
Yes.
And I just didn't know at the time. Now I understood. And So now how I can show up, like honoring the things that my grandfather taught me, the things my mom was teaching me, still teaching me to this day, and then understanding the energy that used to pulse from my hands, how I used to deny it. So my hands used to sweat, like I had hyperhidrosis. They would pour water from them, like dripping. And I didn't understand that I needed to release the energy, the Reiki. I needed to release it. I was holding it. I was trying to, like make it go away. I just needed to unleash all of that. And so I'm able to do that with my clients, my friends, my family. I'm able to show up for them with this cool straw that I am, and let all this beautiful unconditional love unleash in a way that helps activate what's already in them. And so that's how I show up as an energy healer. And it's cool to see the places that we talk about when we talk about meditative states or dimensions or whatever, walking in the spirit world and in the physical world at the same time, being a spiritual being and a human being at the same time, and just fully knowing that. The knowing of that allows you to see it, hear it, feel it on every level.
Totally. Yeah. And I love just the definition of the one who knows, shaman, right? It's the one who knows. And people, sometimes that can be intimidating to people because they think, well, there's so much I don't know, but it's not about information. No. This is not about memorizing facts, and knowing is about, well, first of all, it's an experience. When you are in touch with that dimension of being, I always say that dimension within you, within all of us, we call that God. Jesus would say the kingdom of heaven is within you, right? So this dimension within you, when we're in touch with that, you're in touch with everything, which is all knowing, all the wisdom, all the love, all the, whatever we need is there. And that is the work of turning inward, connecting with that, because that informs everything we're doing here, which is amazing. So speaking of informing what we're doing here, I'm curious as to what is your perception of what is needed most in the world? So I had this phrase, like, if you could complete this phrase, what is needed most in this world what would you say to that?
The embodiment of love.
The embodiment of love.
We hear it, in the Bible and in other religious texts, love one another, right? And do unto others. Not as they do unto you, but as you wish they would, right? I don't like to quote it exactly. I also don't like to get heady or scientific about anything because it takes away the innocent play for me. And that's where I find the truth in things. If I get too linear, rational, too much, then I take away the magic. But that's just how I operate. Not everyone does. Sure. Some people are really good with the facts and the details and like the quantum physics of it all. That's just not me. But yeah, I think I know when I'm acting from a space of love, everything around me is different. How I see everything is different. How I show up is different. So that doesn't mean that I don't get angry, upset, frustrated, those things. Sure. It's just that I'm always reminded, am I showing up in love? And so if there's a piece of me that needs to be loved on, then I can work my way through the anger, the fear, the grief. Because I'm showing up, I'm embodying love. And especially as an empath, which I feel like empaths are just like really loving people and they take on all this energy. But when you show up from a place of love, you have beautiful boundaries. And you know that the sand that's in this oyster, you can shift it and change it into a pearl.
That's so good.
Yeah.
That's so good. I love that. When beautiful boundaries, thinking of beautiful boundaries, and I've heard this, in relationships, relationships tend to be, there's a lot of, there can be a lot of drama in relationships, and one of the reasons for that, I think, is because the ground of being hasn't been established in us. And so if the ground of being isn't established, then obviously there's something we may want to try to establish that in the other person. But when I think of beautiful boundaries, I think of the earth, right? Think about the earth. The earth is, so what is love? What does it mean to love? And to maybe to skip to another little example here, there was a guy one time, he was talking about his mother. He was about 10 or 11 years old. And his mother came to him and said, I love you so much. I love you with all my heart. I would do anything for you. I would give my life for you. And she was just kind of very extravagantly expressing her love for him. And he was he's kind of in his head a little bit. And he said, I know you love me, mom, but why do you love me? I want to know why. She's like, what do you mean? Why? And he said, why do you love me? Like there has to be some reason. And then she thought about it and she was kind of taken back and she goes, well, you're an amazing kid. And here's all the things about you. And she started listing attributes.
Oh,
and he thought about it and he said, well, and they were really close with the neighbors. The neighbors had a big family and they were very close. He said, everything that you just said about me, we can say about the neighbor's kids, like literally. And he like listed off the names of the kids, like, aren't they this way? Aren't they this way? And she couldn't argue. She said, yeah, they actually have all those attributes. He said, but do you love them the way you love me? And she had to be honest. She said, no, I don't. And he said, well, it can't be because of the attributes then. Why do you love me? And she didn't know how to answer it. She was really kind of upset. She goes away, she comes back and she says, I realize why I love you. And he said, why? And she said, because you come from me, because you're me. You're an extension of me. And I see that. So therefore, so he said, it's not about me at all. It's literally you. It's your ability to include me into you is the love you feel, because we are that source of love. And I think about the earth for a moment, like the earth, like what does the earth do for us?
Yeah.
Contains us. That is love. And when that's a boundary too. The boundary is us. It's never another. It's always us. And I think sometimes that can be a little confusing, but that's what I hear you say is just that beautiful boundary is when we come back to us, ourself, our source, our highest. And that is literally the container. And how big is that container? Big enough to include, and whoever we include, that's love. That's the one we love. So it's super, just incredible, the work that you're doing in the world. And I guess a question I would have for you as we just wrap up our conversation here would be, what would you like to, how would you like to encourage folks who are listening to this? What would you like to say to them? What do you feel like is the message for them?
If you feel that there's something more calling you in your life, there is, and you're not alone on that journey.
So good. So good. We are definitely supported on this journey. Not alone. Love that. That's fantastic. How can people get to know your work a little bit?
Well, they can find me at thetempleorar.com. So the temple, ORAR.com. And if that's too long, then lisannv.com. You can find me there too.
Perfect. Fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jamal. This was such a beautiful, beautiful chat. It's been my honor to be here.
Awesome. Well, I look forward to staying in touch, and thank you for the work you're doing. And if you're listening to this, go watch Lisann on her numerous shows and films that she's been in. Manifest. That's probably is that the current?
That's the latest, yeah.
Recurrent role that you have there in Manifest. Okay, fantastic. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, and we will be in touch. Take care.